Thursday, September the 13th. Lake level is right at 908, about 7 feet below pool. It's dropped a few inches since a report last week. It's steadily going down. There's a lot of things popping up on the lake. I mean, there's a lot of submerged islands popping up. So if you're out there running around, keep an eye on your depth finder, especially up in the James River. A lot of them flats that normally people that we take for granted, you can run aground on them right now, and some of them are out in the middle of the river. So be careful out there. But a lot of the bite hasn't changed too much for me. Water temperature still right at 78, 77 and a half, 78 degrees first thing in the morning. It's getting back up to 80. Started cooling down, but then we had them warm days again. But I've noticed that the thermocline seems to be moving up a little higher in the water column. It seems like it's about 22 feet or so. And my jig bite is getting a lot more consistent. I'm catching a lot more smallmouth on the jig, but it seems like it's over 8 o'clock. We haven't had a real cloudy day. It looks like we're going to have some clouds this weekend, so I'm anxious to see if that bite holds up. But I've been doing it from the Campbell Point to Ants Creek, up in the dam area, just fishing main lake, secondary points. A lot of the same places would fish in the spring. They're just on the points right outside of the pockets, where the fish normally spawn. Usually if you got deep water on one side or the other point, it seems to be better. But most of the fish that I'm catching aren't much deeper than 15 foot. Some of them 5 to 10 feet deep. And what I've been using is a half-ounce football jig. I've been throwing a pig sticker jig. The Magic Cross seems to be working real good. Brown with a little orange. PBJ. This particular one I got tipped with a pocket chunk. Now a lot of times, one day I'll get bit dragging the bait. Next day I'll get bit popping it, working pretty aggressively. So you just kind of need to mix up your retrieve. And the thing that I found, whichever way you're working it, if you miss a fish, you swing and you miss it. And this is kind of common on a football jig anyways. First thing you want to do is drop your rod tip back down, wait a few seconds, and normally the fish will come back for it, and the second time they hit it a lot harder. For some reason, a lot of us, after we swing on a fish and miss, we've got a natural instinct to reel in for some reason and look at the bait. Well, you don't want to do that. Like say, if he bites, you swing and you miss, just let it lay there. They'll normally come back. Drop shot bite. It's still going on pretty good, but you got to fish a lot of areas. You got to find the bait on some of the flat points. I've been catching some suspended over deep water and some off gravel points, anywhere from 23 to as deep as 32 foot. Like I say, it's not real consistent. You got to move around a lot, and there's a lot of short fish. Now I have been catching more smallmouth out there than I have been too. So that tells me the smallmouth are really starting to move around. Water get a little cooler. They're going to show up even better. And we've been catching, some in the 3-pound range where, the week before, the ones we're catching were 2-pounders or just a little over. I've also been starting to get a little bit of a bite on some of the on some of the docks, but I've been fishing the docks shallow. My spoon bite and drop shot bite off of them deeper docks is really tapered off. Seems like you got to hit a lot of docks to get either a drop shot bite or a spoon. But I'm finding some smallmouth and largemouth up in there in the shallower part of the big docks, probably 15 foot or less. I'm just working a 3/8 ounce. It's a Snowden jig. It's a pig sticker makes it. But a little Aikens or a little Chomper's jig will work as well. It's just a little small profile jig. I'm throwing a lot of green pumpkin purple. I like to use a little critter craw. Speed craw will work. If the fish is suspended, if they're biting it on the way down, a lot of times I'll use a pocket chunk. And if I get a bite at, like say if it's 5 or 8 foot down, then what I'll try to do is I'll let that bait get down to about that depth in the stall, and then just kind of swim it out, work it a little bit more aggressively. And a lot of times if they're suspended and they're out there chasing shad, they'll bite that jig. And with that pocket chunk on there, it's got real good swimming action. And now some of those fish will be really shallow. Even in the real clear water, they'll be up underneath the walkway ramps. And I've been finding that in the backs of the pockets and in the cuts, there's a lot of real little shad. And what we've been doing in there is we've been getting them even in the middle of the day. We've been able to catch them on a topwater. We've been throwing a jointed redfin, Rapala, Ristapop will work. Also like a Popar or Yellow Magic will work. And they don't necessarily have to be around the cedar trees or the wood. A lot of the baits just relating to the rock. And also a small spinnerbait would work too, like a little 1/4 ounce War Eagle. And what I would throw is it's called blue herring. And you can just burn it right through anytime you see that bait, the little shad flickering either around your crankbait or your topwater, there's a good chance you're going to get bit. Now, a lot of them fish have been largemouths, but they've been smaller ones. I don't think, we're too far out before some of the bigger fish will start to move in. Maybe if we get rain this weekend, cool that water down, and actually get a little runoff, it may trigger some of that bigger largemouth to come up on the bank. Now, them fish I'm catching around the docks, that's going to do nothing but get better as these fish are moving back into pockets, chasing the shad back in there. A lot of the fish are, really feeding up on crawdads pretty heavy too. So that'll do nothing but get better as it gets a little cooler. And the little baits that I'll throw back in there where them little shad are in the backs of the creeks and in the pockets, I'll kind of mix it up. Sometimes I'll go with like a 2.5 Strike King, a fatter bait. But if there's a lot of little bait, a bait that works good is like this is a little Deep We Are Rebel. And this is a little Bandit 100. Now Bandit also makes like a 200 that's got about the same bill. This little square bill will run from 1 to about 3 feet. The 200 will run anywhere from 3 to 6 feet. And I like something in the shad pattern. You'll see both of these I got of that splatterback. If I got some stain in the water, I'll use something with a little chartreuse and black. Now something that I'll do on these crankbaits, I think I talked about it on my wiggle warts a couple weeks ago. They come with real small hooks because it's a small bait. So if you go to put bigger hooks on it, the hooks tangle. But what I do is I put a number 4 short shank up on the front and a number 6 short shank on the back. Well, they will still tangle. So they'll get hooked up on each other. But what I do is right here on the very back, when I get the hook off, I'll take and I'll put a little rubber band, like what comes on a spinnerbait skirt or a jig skirt. I'll put it right up over the split ring and where the eye goes into the bait. What that does, it keeps that split ring going straight out, which doesn't allow the hooks to tangle. But I've still got total flexibility of the split ring and ring in the hook. Anyways, that works out good for me because I like a little bit bigger hook on the front of the bait. And I don't seem to have any trouble with the bait as far as changing the way it's running or the action of it or getting stuck anymore. So it's something you try. And any little small crankbait will work, like a number 5 Rapala will work, a 6 will work, even a shad wrap will work when you start seeing them little baits. Now, if you get a chance, I've been using some of these new prototype rods of Lou's. They got them out to us about 5 or 6 months ago. We did a lot of different testing. A lot of different guys did all over the country, and they got a lot of the fishermen's opinion as far as what little things they needed to change on them. But they've got them in stock. They just got them in, I think, today or yesterday in their Sportsman Factory outlet, and they'll be available all over the country here in the next week or two. But if you get a chance, you need to check them out. It's really an awesome rod. The whole line of rods. They've come out with some new crankbaits, some jig rods. And what they've done is they've got their other team Lou's on closeout. So a lot of the ones that they've got left, it's over 50% off of their regular price. They're making room for their new ones. But what they've done on a lot of they've gone with the micro guides on just about all of them to lighten them up. They've got a little bit softer tip, so the bend is actually all the way through the rod, especially like on the jig and the crankbait rod. When you set the hook on the jig, instead of having the back part of the bottom part of the rod all backbone, it kind of bends all the way through. So it just keeps steady pressure on the fish instead of, like when you flip, instead of pulling the fish up out of the water, just keep a steady bind on them. So if you get a chance, you need to check them out at Sportsman Factory Outlet at 2333 East Bennett in Springfield. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.